Hi, welcome to Calmer Lives, therapeutic support embracing neurodiversity. This is our check-in series, a chance for myself, Howard Hoskins, and fellow therapeutic mentor Jennifer Levey to share our thoughts, experiences, and maybe the odd tip supporting neurodivergent individuals and their families. Hopefully, a little something for anyone to take away, whether you're a neurodivergent young person, neurodivergent adult, parent, carer, family member, friend, or a professional. We invite you now to take a moment and join us as we discuss the latest topics on our mind.
The year ahead, pressing pause, reflection, setting goals, expectations and aspirations.
What I thought, it's a loose theme as ever, but one that maybe I thought was quite apt at the start of a year when we've just come through a Christmas period, that kind of reflective time of the year, isn't it? The end of the year. And then we'll kind of think along the way we not only support families and young people, but maybe even ourselves, some of our own anecdotes, isn't it, about how we've kind of used this winter to sort of have that pause in the year, reflect where we're at, and then maybe we'll even get as far as thinking ahead. How do we then set ourselves these short-term, medium-term, long-term kind of ideas about where we kind of want to project ourselves, knowing that there could be any number of obstacles, let alone the grey, dreary weather that we're trying to have a conversation in today. And I've just checked in with Jennifer describing my 3-year-old with the blanket over her head today. And I'm thinking, but it's nursery, like this is the best day ever. Like, what problems have you got in your world? You should be bouncy and energetic and looking forward to your mates. And even that was too much, with just knowing that she was in this lovely cocoon and it looked very snug and the lights were off as I went in today. My wife had already been in there and put her head round the corner and quickly moved herself away. I got as far as the end of her bed and got a few kicks. I went to alongside the bed and the duvet got pulled over even more. So yeah, even knowing at that age with the whole world in front of her today, I just had to sit alongside and make a judgment call as to how far to nudge.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're very gradual, gentle, side by sideness, massaged her out of her
Massaged
cocoon.
her out. There was a good lead in time. I guess it got a little bit more, maybe because there's enough of that's happened already, that she then suddenly kicked into gears that actually, because I sort of moved my way sort of towards out the door thinking I'm getting absolutely nowhere here. But I suppressed some of that. I've literally got 10 minutes to get you up and out the door to be somewhere on time, more on time for me to get to work rather than the pressure of her going into a breakfast club where it doesn't matter to them if she was late. So it was my timekeeping really, and all that of that kind of angst for me that I had to put to one side today to an extent in front of her. I'll do the stressing away from her in front of my other family members. But then all of a sudden it's like, something just suddenly clicked into gear for her, as if, what's the problem? And the next minute I turn around and she's wearing a princess outfit, and that was her way of being in control of her day and making sure that she had a favorite teddy bear for her anchor. She knew quickly what she wanted to eat, and all of a sudden she had an ability to seemingly go from 0 to 100, and within 10 minutes she's in the car and we're off, and she was able to have a complete, seemingly different set of feelings in front of me. I was impressed with her. I was slightly impressed with myself not to rush her, knowing that she can do that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's trusting that space, isn't it? Trusting that actually if I give the moment, things will speed up quicker than if I push.
So have I already gone off on a tangent? Yeah, giving ourselves a moment. I think I was sort of hoping our conversation would be about, how do we give ourselves a moment to pause, reflect, think objectively about what we're seeing for our ourselves, for our children's behaviours, I think we'll go from there.
Mm. Well, a lot of our families will be having as well teenagers with mocks or pre-mocks or deciding on options and all that sort of thing at the moment. That's that time of year for which in the bleak of winter, probably for some of those young people getting out of bed is not the happiest moment.
No, and I'm right in thinking some of your children are still in that position, or they've just completed some of that part of their
My
learning.
youngest are doing mock A levels.
Yeah, that was right.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then I'm just thinking of some of my families, some have got, they're in year 11 or they're in year 9 and they've got to pick their options. In these sort of coming weeks, there's meetings about that, and I can only imagine in like, coming out of Christmas and school not being easy anyway, that could feel like another layer of stuff.
For you as a parent, then, do you get a sense of absorbing some of these kind of invisible pressures? They're there, that extra.
What from mine?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we do. We back off significantly. We don't. We're available, but we don't. Like, there's usual things, perhaps as a family, that you might ask each other to do more often, like the chore type bits. And when it comes to around mocks and things like that, Dan and I tend to back off.
Yeah.
We don't ask so much. And it is just interesting, just different personalities of all my kids and how their approach for themselves of individual. Um, Having one that needs to be very organized, from like everything from when they're studying to like preparing the right nutritious type food for brain activity.
Right. Yeah.
And the other one that is more like, I need comfort. It's very demanding. I need to make sure I have my comforts in place. It's the opposite way round, really. And to feel like I'm not made to do this studying. I'll do it when I'm ready, thank you very much. And then then he's more likely to do it than if she put a structure in place, it would feel like prison. So
Interesting. Yeah. Two very different ways of having a sense of control over
yeah,
the pressures and the uncertainties, then, but two
yeah,
seemingly on the surface completely different ways of
yeah,
handling that,
yeah,
which
yeah.
maybe then does kind of segue us nicely onto the types of young people that I guess we're ever growing our experience around, isn't it? Of how young people require a sense of control in things they do.
Mm. They do. And what I guess what the common ground is between them though is that they're both doing their way. Like
Hmm.
there's not a single one of us that said, well, you should do it like this. Why are you not doing it like that? We're around for a discussion and for them to vent and to show their fears or worries or um that side by side kind of, oh yeah, I really get why you might feel like that. And I wonder how you might how you might manage your way out of that. I'm wondering, or just kind of helping them find their values of what they need as their essentials, so that then they are in the driving seat. So even though they do very different ways, it's their way. So I think that's the thing. That's it's not coming from um it's not coming from their teacher, it's not coming from parent, it's not coming from one of them pressurizing the other one or anything like that. Um, and we'll see. We'll see how we
We'll
get
see
through the
where, yes.
year.
And then I guess it's, yeah, how it's not like one measure. You don't put like a measuring stick to that, do we? But there's lots of, I guess, kind of signs that they're what's the word, developing, evolving, as and kind of various behaviors, I guess, that would give you indicators that they're where am I going with that one? I'm trying to think of yeah, that kind of signs that they're finding that self-awareness as they're doing it.
Definitely. Yeah. Increasingly, they're kind of, I'm seeing that they're working stuff out. Oh, if I do it like this, then I notice I tend to do that. Or if I do it like this, then I notice that then I focus better. Or if I do that, then I get distracted. Or so yeah, they're noticing for themselves. Mm. Yeah. But I suppose also though that could be tricky for some people. Maybe they're not noticing. Maybe they're just feeling like they're swimming in a bit of a gloopy sea and don't really know, you know. Um, Thinking about some of my families or one of my families where they've got to pick their options in the next couple of weeks. If I know it's feeling really overwhelming for them. And I think it's feeling like a lot of pressure, because just getting to school, even for half of the time, has been really, really, really tough. So to think actually it's getting serious, the school, from the angle of school, it's like, oh, this is a positive. This is, you're going to be getting into work that's going to get you qualifications. It's time to get you into school more. And but from that student perspective, it's, well, if I haven't even managed this, and how am I going to do that? And um, so again, I think it's going to be one little step in front of the other.
Yeah. So is that where the goals and objectives, they're not the wrong ones, but they've just been set at a time that's, is it beyond them, or is it just
I suppose it's just a situation, isn't it? Like we have a school, we have a system that is, this is what you do in year 7 and 8, this is what you do in year 9, this is what you do going up in increments. And their situation is their situation. It's been really hard for them with the school environment. And so we could have done with perhaps another equivalent of year 8, or I don't know, an easier time to work out a way back in for them. But instead of that, because of the age they are, because of the year they're in, it's like this target's going to happen anyway, regardless. So either you pick the options or we pick them for you.
I've got it's just jogged my memory to make sure I share with you a good news story from a family I got to check back in with last week. We've had sessions over the course of, I think, a couple of years now. Initially a couple back to back, but really from there on it became a kind of a bit more kind of monthly and ad hoc. So we'd had a good kind of 3-4 months of little contact, but we kind of came back on scene using that January slot, isn't it, to go, oh, we'd like to refresh. This is where we're up to. And it was one of those where one of our first assignment at the January 2024, I offered them an opportunity to be kind of projecting and thinking ahead, and what will we see in a year's time? What's the kind of your sight on a value that you'd most like to see for your young man? Young man, oh, I'm going to make up a number for his age, 14-ish, just totally forgotten. Early teens. He has a diagnosis of autism, PDA profile, uh, anxiety based behavior, and a history of school-based trauma, as kind of the environments that were too overwhelming for him historically. And when they came on the scene to me, he'd already had kind of a good 4 or 5 months of going into kind of recovery from burnout. And it was very early days of finding some alternative options so that he was still engaged in learning. So they were exploring things like online schools, and various ways to kind of keep that available to him. But he was just starting to come into opportunities where he can have that greater sense of control. And parents were really just at the they'd already begun their kind of, I guess that word, journey into exploring how do we create a low demand environment from at home so that we could sort of support his mental well-being to start with. And that's very much where they were kind of year and a half, 2 years ago. But they set themselves their 2024 kind of vision ahead for the year ahead was we would like our son to enjoy learning. That was actually I think quite a big end goal for a year ahead.
Yeah.
That was a big one. But they knew at the start of last year how to go about it. They'd sort of hit a few pivotal points in what they could now see a way of other ways that their young person could learn and be in environments that could fit his need. It was going to require a lot of tenacity on their part. They know now that every ins and outs and workings of council and what you can achieve through EHCPs and AOTAS and all these systems. So they've really had to sort of arm themselves with a lot of knowledge. They sort of reminded me that knowledge is power when it comes to all of that area about how to advocate for your child's needs. They I wouldn't say stumbled across, probably because they started to have a better idea about kind of when they met the right organization, they could help sustain something. So there was things like is it Dungeons and Dragons kind of group?
Oh yeah,
One of
yeah.
those, and it was just an initial way so that they could help their son still engage something that could potentially be kind of interesting to him. And it was led by a chap, neurodivergent, really, it wasn't set up as like an autistic or ADHD group, but obviously that was going to be their higher clientele. And straight away it was being well scaffolded about how he could engage in that. So he could go along with dad. Dad was very much part of it to start, and there was that real kind of just transition as part of it. And he's maintained a really good relationship with an adult now outside of his mum and dad. So he has now one brand new member of it that they can call a trusted adult that's included him in this backdrop of a special interest. And so that's maintained, that's kind of got its kind of rhythm in his week now, that particular group. There's been a collection of like trial and erroring certain mentors, but I love the way that I think parents have been able to introduce options where it really is like setting ourselves up for success. So like the worst case scenario is there might be a little nudge on the anxiety and overwhelm, but it's the smallest nudge and they know the escape plan. So it does have a sense of that they're in it together, but we're not backing away from these experiences altogether, and we're removing all the demands and expectations, but we'll lead you to this point and we're still here, and you've got our trust that we really do come away from that experience if it's too much on that day. So there's been lots of that. I'm thinking how they kind of use their year to kind of keep kind of shifting things forwards. This kind of constant flux, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the good news story part of this is our check-in last week is they said we reached our goal.
Yay.
They've reached their goal. So he is now, I've totally forgotten the education setting's name. I've got a lot of remembering to do today. And I'd love to learn about this particular service because it's an education provider, but they've done a lot of unschooling. It's very much a self-directed type setup. Dad said to me, it was like, he said to me, it was his experience of like walking into a sixth form, but where oh, what's the word you used? But you're still like totally in control of everything. Like, even the environment itself was a house.
Mm.
There wasn't kind of potential triggers of school-based trauma of anything laid out like a school-based setting. The staff are incredibly experienced. They're very much alongside you. They're collaborating on things with you. And so he's just joined this setup in the last since the start of this year. So he's like 2-3 weeks in. They offer those kind of same kind of sort of type transition ideas of when you first go in, you're just going to meet an adult for the first day or two, get your bearings, they're alongside you. And within 2 weeks, all of a sudden, I think he's he's kind of clicked that he's now in a group of like I think he's surrounded by at least three other teenage girls, and I think the reason he went to this particular place as well is he knew one of the boys outside of this location, I think, was being introduced this week. So there was sort of familiarities and unfamiliarities and a nice kind of blend to that. And yeah, it was lovely to hear within a couple of weeks that the family have that confidence now that this is a setting that, yes, there might be kind of a bit of storming and forming. I can't imagine suddenly being surrounded by three teenage girls that have also got their own requirements. And I think he observed a moment the other day where one of them was struggling,
Right.
but he was able to say they were struggling, he was able to describe it to mum and dad, describe it to another teacher, so that he actually maintained an ability that he didn't become overwhelmed by that, and was able to kind of give the slightest sense about how he felt about it, which was quite a massive thing for this young
Yeah.
gentleman to be able to
Yeah.
describe it and what he was watching.
Yeah.
And yeah, for parents to say, they said it's the first time we sort of really put ourselves a sight on what we wanted to achieve with him for a year ahead and get there. It's like not often you as a partnership, is it, that you actually put your intent and and we got there. I think it's one of those rare moments that they had to keep a process throughout their year of constantly evaluating, checking in on themselves, their own well-being, and that's how they were using Carmelize, I guess, to some extent, and other organizations. But it was amazing to hear that sense of how, yeah, it takes an awful lot, doesn't it, to achieve such a big value, a big vision. But between them, they found a way to keep those tiny little momentums ongoing. And there would have been moments of feeling like you're not really doing much.
Yeah.
Like me
Yeah.
trying to get my daughter out of bed this morning. There was a few moments of like, am I doing anything by just sort of lying on the floor here? Um, but yeah, to have that ability, I guess, as a partnership to sustain that over quite such a long timeline, I was really impressed with how they've gone about that. But obviously, they said it required a lot of tenacity and a lot of them unlearning about kind of ways of learning and knowing that this is the way it's going to work for us. And they said they had to treat a lot of professionals like the professionals didn't know of something. They said this is how it works. So
Yeah.
don't assume that professionals know everything about the different options out there.
Right. Okay.
So that was kind of interesting as well to pick up on that.
What I think I'm noticing here though as well is they had one goal and they gave themselves a year. And quite often in the system we're in, it's like, oh, we'll do this for 2 weeks and then we'll try and increase it, or we'll do this for this half term and then we'll try and increase it. And a year is probably the kind of pacing we're talking about, that we need. But we're talking about school-based trauma, and we've
Yeah,
got to rebuild and help that person to
I was asked to sort of give a timeline on recovery time from school-based trauma. I didn't have a factual anecdote, but I'm picking up that it can be anything up to sort of 2 years.
like there's been a few webinars where we're talking about burnout, so not even specifically
Mm,
school trauma, but with burnout, quite often it's thought that it's either as long as it took to reach that or double it even, so
yeah,
it can
yeah,
be that. So you've done a whole term that's completely led to burnout. That might mean that you need twice that to recover from it potentially. You may
yeah.
not, but I think that's the difficulty, isn't it? That there isn't literally a scientific equation or a
No,
formula
that's it.
where we can say to schools X equals Y, blah, 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 blah,
I think the
whatever.
parent that asked me
Yeah,
wanted that formula.
yeah.
And they'd been doing their research and came up with this kind of 2 year number. But I really, yeah, that's the one I've picked up on before, that period that you've been in burnout, that you can kind of plus it on and more. And I guess even then it needs it, and with the the setting and the therapeutic support that works for you, isn't it, in that time?
Yeah. What an amazing story.
It was a really good one, yeah, and now I've got something to base on that kind of, again, having that extra faith in things like side on low demand parenting. But you have to sort of see that projection, don't you, to keep the faith alive in it, when in the moment you're going to have periods yourself where extra obstacles, extra things come your way, I guess, as parents, as you're guiding your child through that time. Like, in part, that expectations to incrementally, it should be done at a quicker pace. Um, and we have to be really aware. We've used this term together, haven't we, a lot? Crisis mindset. I think that one is certainly something that this particular couple would have been learning the effects of that when they were first presented with a child going into burnout. And they had to become quite mindful of what that was all about. It's something we covered together in a bit of kind of you first. So to explain crisis mindset, what's the kind of 4 characteristics I've got of that one? Let me just bear with me. I've heard it kind of characterizes feeling frantic or desperate, operating in day-to-day survival mode, feeling like you must try everything. That's a tricky one, isn't it? When we've got a world at our fingertips of information on the internet, and we go to every resource. Only able to focus on the short term. So that brings us nicely back to our conversation today, isn't it? Unable to actually project to the next 3 months, 6 months, a year. It's very much kind of firefighting, and you're kind of reacting rather than getting a proactive plan in place in that time. They were a good news story. Have you got any? Oh, yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, so I'm wondering if we share any basic pointers for if anyone is identifying with being in crisis mindset, about how to come out of crisis mindset so that you even have a chance of getting towards that calmer place and that more balanced sort of formal way of navigating your way forwards.
It's making me think of like even creating that 5-10 minutes where you're in a space where you're available to be objective and thinking about what you're observing, what behaviors you're seeing and witnessing. I've done a lot with parents, but we have to schedule time in our week to make that part of your week. I'm going to identify somewhere in there that I get to set time aside. So that's either for scheduling time to use that journal entry, or make a note, or whatever format works for you. And I guess alongside scheduling it is that your own well-being, isn't it? It's whether we signpost people towards things like mindfulness, or what's going to get those serotonins and endorphins back in play in a way that they've maybe had some success in the past. Whether that's reading a book for themselves, it's nothing to do with neurodivergence, something that helps them be, I guess, kind of present, and learn how not to be quite so judgmental and selfish for doing it. And I guess there's quite a lot of, we use our sessions to obstacle assess alongside them as to what's getting in the way of that scheduling. But scheduling is certainly a part of the process. I imagine it commits you to something, but hopefully it comes from that person as to what they're committing to. It's not for me to dive in there and I suggest it needs to be done on this basis, but we do want that person to start giving a bit of structure to that.
Yeah, I think also perhaps it's if you're recognizing actually I am feeling majorly overwhelmed and I'm frantically trying to plug the hole or fix the problem, and it's urgent, it needs to happen now. Perhaps is that maybe I'm trying to fix it now, isn't gonna, if I don't know what it is I'm fixing exactly because we're too frantic to be able to navigate it, then maybe it's going surrendering a little bit to basics are the care of like self-care, care to my child, care to the family unit. And if we take enough stock, if we slow it down, then we've got a chance to breathe, and then we've got a chance to think about, okay, let's try one way first rather than 10 different ways, all in one go.
That leads me, I guess, on to some of the toolkits that we're offering to help people identify that one thing, isn't it? That helps us kind of identify something to keep track of. I've particularly liked the Declarative Language Handbook by Linda K. Murphy. She's got a useful tool in the back of her book that was a nice kind of table, and it just kind of prompted not to suddenly take on every, like, I think there's about 15 statements on there that you could be attending to, but there's some statements there like I was patient with my child, and it has a not at all, sometimes, and very likely, I think, was the scale to it. Why do I keep coming back to patience, and my 3-year-old comes back into my mind every moment of the day at the moment?
Oh, I wonder.
Yeah. There's loads of tools out there, isn't there, of what we can tune into. I know we for a period of time, I'm curious to know if you're still using it with some families. We created a darts is very popular at the moment, isn't it? We've got our kind of our target with that thing in the middle that we're striving towards, and we've all got our own kind of scale as to what that is, whether it is calmness or connection or happiness, that lovely little sweet spot in the bullseye. Um, but sometimes, yeah, just having one thing that helps you know that you're moving towards that. I keep throwing a dart at you. There we go. So some people work lovely with visuals. It's amazing how often we have to adapt and tailor this personalized target. I remember kind of we used numbers on scales that might work for one person, and I had a parent completely disengage with me as soon as I put a number scale in front of them once. It became a trigger for them.
Yeah. I think it is a tricky one with numbers, actually. I think it's back to school, doesn't it? Want 10 out of 10
Yeah,
on my spelling test.
yeah. Like there's a right and a wrong way to perform now, I guess. There's
Yeah,
there's a correct way and an incorrect way.
yeah. And yeah, so finding different ways for individuals, or it's like the whole family, or as their own individual unit, or individuals within the family, and what speaks to them in terms of gauging. Like the spoons theory is a really good one. The
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
how many, what's giving me back spoons, what's taking away spoons. And then, for a lot of my families, it's not spoons, it's Lego blocks, or it's candles, or adapting that scale even, but having the same principle of what gives me back, what takes away, raising my self-awareness, then raising my ability to self-regulate.
I like the spoon theory. I like the battery. I'm sat in McDonald's waiting for a client to turn up last Friday. I've got no plug-in for my laptop, and my computer was really good at communicating with me. I've got 41 minutes left of usefulness, and then I'm off. Then I disengage. 41 minutes was my battery life saying, "That's your lot." And it was a nice little segue into kind of chatting with mum and going, well, this is where my computer's at. I'm probably on about 53, as it was the end of the week on a Friday. And my best guess for the lad who a full week of school is pretty full on, and it's the only time slot we've managed to find on a weekday that's the end of the week. But at least we've got food and McDonald's as the maybe it gives him just enough sustenance and motivation to hang in there for like his dial of 10% that's probably left to listen in on us. And very indirectly we found some ways of interacting and communicating. And then it was just he has that knowledge that as soon as that battery life is out and he's out of McDonald's, he's just ready to release that school uniform. We're all joking that he wants like Velcro down his top so he can just go. And then that weekend is he needs an entire weekend of Lego and a lot of time to himself, and that's his battery charger again. He needs that whole weekend before he can give another 5 days of school a go again.
Yeah.
And this is a great education setup that they're doing what they can to meet need. Yeah, anything that helps us check in where we're at, I think that I find it's one of my most favorite parts of the job is finding those things. It's what works for you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Last up, then, you can put me on the spot here. Anything that we're doing for ourselves of like habit forming for the year ahead? What's getting in the way? What's going well? Have you set yourself a year goal? Blimey.
Set myself a year goal. As in something that I need to achieve within a year's time, or as in to do within this year?
I haven't. I was kind of curious. Yeah, some people it's that challenge of setting a New Year's resolution, isn't it? But I think we personally, I think it's what I'm just trying to sort of work out for myself what keeps me on track with knowing I want to be kind of always trying to work a bit harder on being a bit healthier, try and reduce some habits, try and increase other habits, knowing that they ebb and flow. But I, I'm thinking of this amazing good news story that they were able to really work as a couple to say this is kind of the value of where we want to be in a year's time. And I'm noticing as I'm talking about it out loud, I haven't really done that for myself.
Yeah. Well, I think they had a very specific reason, didn't they?
They
So they've
did.
got a very specific need and agenda to help their son, and so I guess that's not necessarily where we're all at every year to year to year. I think for me, you asked about if I've got New Year's resolution type stuff. I think it's just more the allowing. It's a contradiction, isn't it? Sometimes us as therapeutic practitioners and also like myself as a counsellor spend a lot of time helping or trying to encourage and support clients with their regulation and their well-being, and then I may have back-to-back appointments, and then my brain gets overcooked, my body needs to move, and I need to release stuff somewhere, and so I guess I get better at that, and then I get worse at it, and I get better at it, and I get worse at regulating that, and so that's something, if anything, that I know I want to really get more consistent at, is that actually if I'm being like I'm too long on the screen, I do take time and I go stretch and I go put some music on and jump up and down or something, or go open the door and look out and get daylight and fresh air and that kind of thing. And not thinking, oh, I'm on the clock, I should be, like a Trojan, because actually my brain is going to get slower and slower and slower and slower and slower anyway, and I'll probably end up with a whooping headache. And so I'm better off taking the time in between and then creating a more even keel, better regulation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel very fortunate that we have hopefully a sense of control and a capacity in our own work practice to be enabled to do that. Which is very, yeah. I have to sort of unschool myself sometimes that that's absolutely allowed, and it's a priority that then helps you fulfill what is most helpful in what we do. That's a nice one to take away from today. I'll hold on to that part as my takeaway comment from today. Okay, thank you. I think that sees us on a nice uplift for the year ahead, having started our day checking in on the blooming greyness and the sludginess of the weather around us today. But feeling that we're ending on a bit of a smile, hearing that there can be some amazing impacts out there when you're able to sort of have a value, but knowing that you're being supported and guided along an incremental kind of just small steps along the way. Try not to judge ourselves too harshly when we might not be maybe fulfilling our own expectation or other people's expectation. And like you say, sometimes having that value just to sit, pause, slow down. You've got to slow down to speed up in the long run, haven't we? We've got to find that opportunity to offer ourselves that. Or advocate it for on other people's behalves of what that needs to happen. Lovely. Thank you.